Okay.
So today we are learning Parsha Mishpatim, which is Exodus chapters 21 to 24. Let's say the bracha for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzidkenu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who has commanded us to engage in study of words of Torah.
Amen. And thank you in advance, Gail, for all you do.
Well, to be determined. So mishpatim, mishpat means justice. It's often paired with the word tzedek, righteousness and justice, two huge values in Judaism and beyond. At least we think, we hope. And this parsha gives us, I believe, more commandments than any other parsha in the Torah. Like, there are many commandments in here. I forgot to look up the exact number, but I think it's the most in the whole Torah. And these are judicial rulings that relate to standards of conduct, how we behave toward each other, how we behave in society. I want to point out how the whole tone of the Torah narrative changes with this parsha. If you recall, we just got out of Egypt, right? We just got to, we went through the Red Sea. We were at Mount Sinai in Parshat Yitro. We received the 10 Commandments. And all of that was done in a mostly narrative way, telling our story of leaving slavery and getting to at least the beginning of freedom. So if you have Eitz Chaim on the first page of this parsha, page 456, right under the first sentence, it says, with this parsha, the tone of the Torah changes. Up to this point, it has been a narrative with occasional references to laws, such as those regarding circumcision and Pesach. Now the emphasis is reversed. From here on, the Torah will present the rules by which the Israelites are to live, with occasional narrative breaks. So it's like the proportions are changing from laws to narrative. And then under the line, would somebody like to read, if you have Eitz Chaim, the rules of forming a just society? This is a good capsule summary of the parsha. Anybody want to read that?
Gail, before we read, I do have found a note that there are 53 commandments in Mishpat.
53.
And Richie, I read that one source says 36 and one source says 46.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, there, some things, even in the 10 Commandments, the way the first commandment is a statement, not a commandment. So I guess in that vein, there's discrepancy. Yeah. But Gail, what I meant to say when you were very modestly saying TBA, I wanted to say not Aseh v'nishma. We're all in. We have faith.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Richie, are you? Did someone volunteer? No, Richie, you just volunteered to say something, but you want to read that one paragraph, please?
I'm sorry. Where, Gail?
Oh, I'm sorry. 456. If someone else has it.
I have it. 450.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, go ahead.
Start with chapter 21.
Under the line, Rich.
Yeah, under the line. The commentary, the rules.
Excuse me. The rules of forming a just society outlined at the beginning of the Parsha follow the discussion about the design of the altar at the end of the previous one. Quote, in time to come, when there will no longer be an altar, building a just society will be the equivalent of bringing sacrifices, unquote. The laws of the Torah are not given in the names of kings or even in the names of Moses. They are religious and moral instructions given by God. Obeying the laws creates not only a harmonious society, but a just and holy one. Violations are seen as offenses against God, not just against the violated person. Unlike the secular legal traditions of other societies, the laws of the Torah are cited not as the products of human wisdom and experience, but as a reflection of divine principles built into the world. Thus, the dignity of a human being is as much a permanent part of God's creation as the law of gravity.
Thank you so much. I think that's a nice overview of why all these laws are given and how they're connected. So if you look at the very first verse of this parsha, the Hebrew says, "Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem." And so this is God speaking to Moses. These are the rule. It's translated, "These are the rules that you shall set before them." However, if you know your Hebrew grammar, you're going to see that there's this one letter in front of Ela, these, and that's a vip. And what does vi mean? It's a conjunction. And, okay, well, we're starting a new chapter, but sure sounds like we're picking up a story that was already being told. And, oh, by the way, and, well, not so much by the way, but just a continuity, a sense of continuity from what went before. And I just think, this is one aspect of the way the Torah is written that is so fascinating, because with one letter, you can imply or suggest an idea, which is this is all one seamless story. There's a continuity. So what exactly is the continuity? Well, what was happening just before? The first laws in Mishpatim we're going to see are about the treatment of slaves. And what did we just do? We just got out of slavery, right? We just got out of slavery in Egypt. So there is that continuity. And if you think back to the first commandment given at Sinai, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." That's Avadim, the Beit Avadim, from the house of slavery, of bondage. So Beit Avadim is the term. Now, let's look at the opening of this parsha and see the continuity or lack thereof. So somebody want to read, let's read verses 1 to 6 on page 456, or if you have your own Chumash, it's Exodus 21, verses 1 to 6.
I'll read.
Thank you, Patty.
So these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. 7th year, he shall go free without payment. If he came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she has borne him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. But if the slave declares, "I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free," this master shall take him before God. He shall be brought to the door of the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his slave for life.
Thank you. All right, what in the world is going on here? Since when do we have slaves? We just got out of slavery, 430 years of it, by some computations. And now the way this is stated, when, not if, but when you acquire a Hebrew slave, as if this is just the common thing. It's just what is happening in this society, and it brings us up short because of everything that has come before. So there's a continuity, but there's a discontinuity. Now, let's Stephanie.
Good morning, Gail. I have a quick question. I thought we only kept slaves for 7 years and then they had to go free.
They have a choice.
They have a choice, but this says you shall keep him for life.
No, it doesn't.
No.
You shall. It says in the beginning, it says it goes free. That's only if he decides to stay.
Okay. All right. That's a good question. So the situation is, first of all, what I want to lay out, first of all, is that it seemed in post, this is referring, of course, to when they're in the promised land. They haven't gotten there yet. They have, a long 40 years to go. But looking ahead, anticipating when you acquire a slave, this is how it's going to work. The slave, and it's a Hebrew slave.
Yeah.
So the fact that that's a special kind of slave. Okay, so actually, let's read.
Gail, can I ask you a question also?
Yeah, sure.
So the first word in verse 2 is key.
Mm-hmm.
Is that translated as because also?
Yeah.
Could be.
Yes.
So because is really different from when.
Well, the word has, both of those meanings. I think also the word im
Yes.
is another one like that can mean if or
If, yeah.
when. Yeah, but good question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gail. We can't lose track of the fact that we're reading a translation, and I always object to Eitz Chaim's use of the word slave, and I think it should say servant, and servant has a different meaning than slave. There is, a direct connection, as you made, and an irony that, we just got out of Egypt where we were taka slaves, and this is more of an indentured servant. And we've learned over the years the many reasons for which one would become an indentured servant. And so, I think that this translation would be better in English with the word servant or indentured servant.
David, what does your translation say? Because you don't use Eitz Chaim, correct?
Who are you asking?
David.
Yes, correct. My translation says when you acquire a Hebrew slave.
Okay, but still, that's a subjective decision, and it could just be the traditional word, but in English. But really, I find it's inaccurate and does an injustice. There were definitely slaves in the ancient world. There were slaves. So the Torah and our civilization did not abolish the concept and practice of the general umbrella of slavery, but we humanized it and gave dignity. But in this case, it's kind of talking about indentured servants.
Well, it also below the line, it does say that. I mean, it says.
That's where I was going.
Okay, go ahead, Gail, go for it.
Yeah. Beverly?
Yes, where were the slaves coming from? I'm here.
Okay, hold on. Hold your hats. Go to page 457 and look at what it says. The legal code begins with the treatment of slaves, and it's the same word as what we were in Egypt, Eved, even as the Decalogue begins with a reference to Israel's enslavement in Egypt. Does somebody want to keep reading there a little bit?
How could God countenance? Oh, go ahead. Somebody else wants to read.
Jay, you're raising your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difference between slave and servant is important. They become slaves because they lost money, and this person took him up. If he was a servant, he wouldn't have enough money, and he would come to be a servant. It would be his.
It's voluntary.
His voluntary.
Right.
Because he lost money, the other person said, okay, you'll be my slave and I'll take care of you.
Okay, great. Patty, there's a full answer to this on the bottom of page 457. So if you just pick up, how could God count slavery? Okay.
First, we must note that this passage does not refer to the Egyptian model of slavery, a condition of cruel permanent bondage. It deals with people who find themselves obliged to sell their labor for a fixed time to repay a debt or as a result of bankruptcy. Second, the Torah's overall emphasis on human freedom and dignity, its insistence that humans are called to serve God and not a human master, in time led to a strengthening of the rules protecting the rights of slaves and ultimately to a rejection of slavery entirely. The status of a slave in the Torah was better than that of a slave in Egypt, but still fell short of the Torah's vision of innate human dignity. This chapter still considers the slave and his or her family as the master's property and calls for decent treatment. Keep going.
Well, it's just putting it goes on a little more. It's a very good commentary because
Yes.
what it's trying to say is that, as Jay pointed out, people who have become destitute or in great need indentured themselves to someone who would, in fact, or was supposed to protect them, take care of them, but it was never envisioned as a permanent status. It was for 7 years, at which point the slave was supposed to be let free. And so we have to think of the times and the cultural context that this view of so-called slavery was enlightened compared to what other peoples were doing. And we're going to get to, if we have time, we're going to get to a passage later in Deuteronomy, which is basically the same thing we're seeing happen here, but amplified with more protections, more protections for the slaves built in. So now let's continue because I don't want to run out of time. What's going to happen next is, well, before we get to that, so when you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year, he shall go free without payment. He doesn't have to pay for his freedom to the person who is for whom he has been working. Okay, if he came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. But if his master gave him a wife and she has borne him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. Tuck that away in your mind.
Yeah.
We're coming back to that. But so only to say that this slave has a choice and not an easy one. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife and children, I don't wish to go free, then we have this sort of strange ritual that has to be done. And that's what I want to zero in on a little bit now. So you all know about this. This is not new information. But the master shall take him before God. That is often interpreted as before judges. So there's a public aspect to this. And he shall be brought to the door or the doorpost. And the Hebrew is V'higishu Adonai El Hadelet, important word here. He's going to approach him or bring him to the door. O El HaMizuzah, mezuzah, not like what we put up on our doorways, but here it means the doorpost. And his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his slave for life, which the rabbis interpret as only until the next Jubilee year. So, the next Jubilee year could be 5 years hence, not 50. That slave goes free. Okay. So this is still not intended to be permanent. All right, but I want to look at this thing with the awl, this ritual with the awl. It seems like a very strange ceremony. And now I'm going to tell you one of the treasures of the Torah. We have found another word that only appears one time in the whole Torah. That's important, right? You all know that by now. When you come across a word that is only used once, and I will say that same word is used later in Deuteronomy when the same ceremony is performed, but it's used in the same way. So I'm counting that as one, a word that is reserved for one particular kind of event or happening. Okay, now the word for all is Martseya. Sounds a little like Mitzrayim, but it's not related, and it's not spelled the same. But anyway, Rabbeinu Bachya, who was a Spanish Torah commentator in the 13th and 14th century, he zeroes in on this awl. Now, do you know what an awl looks like? It's a tool. It has like a bulb on the top and then this metal part that's usually the bulb is, well, it could be wood, it could be plastic, whatever. It wasn't plastic back then. It was probably wood. And then this narrow piece of metal that comes to a sharp point. Shoemakers use them to make holes for the shoelaces. I have an awl, actually. It's a very useful tool. And that's the instrument that is being used to pierce the ear. So, picture this human being, this slave, is being brought up against the doorpost or of the house, and the master pierces his ear with this awl, which is probably not any more painful than having your ears pierced for earrings, if you ever had that done. And that's what happens. So Rabbeinu Bachya, this Spanish commentator, says that the fact that it says ba martseya and not bi martseya, ba means with the awl, bi martseya would be with an awl. And so he's pointing out the unique use that this tool was being used in this unique way, a special awl for this procedure, which he wonders maybe the court kept the awl, just for this purpose. So the master wouldn't be using this awl to punch holes for shoelaces or sandals or whatever they wore back then. It would be specifically for this ritual with the ear. Okay, and I think that's important. All right, give me a minute. Now, this is the wording here parallels what happens on the night of the Exodus. So go back for a minute to Exodus chapter 12, which is, hold on, let me find it. On page 385 in Eitz Chaim, if you have it. Verse 21. Moses then summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, this is the night of the Exodus, and said to them, go pick out lambs for your families, slaughter the Passover offering, take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and to the doorpost. And don't go outside until God comes by, sees the blood on the lintel, which you have smeared there, and passes over, literally jumps over your house. But look at the words that are used here. He will apply the blood el hamashkof, the el shtei hamizuzot, which is what we have with this ritual, the doorpost, from the blood, min hadam. So it's kind of interesting. Oh, and lo tetzu ish mi petach beito ad boker. Don't go out of the opening of your house. It's interesting. It doesn't say delet. It says the opening of your house. I'm going to try and come back to that later, but it means the door until morning. Now, it's kind of interesting that back in Exodus 21 in Mishpatim, it doesn't mention any blood. But what do you think happens when the master sticks that awl through the slave's ear? There's going to be some blood. So I think there's an understood parallel going on here. These two rituals are connected in our minds through what happens and through the vocabulary. Okay. Now, what the rabbis were bothered, and I would say even shocked by the idea that a slave would choose to remain as a servant or as a slave to the master, who, hopefully by after 7 years has improved his standing. The slave's been fed, the slave's been taken care of. The slave, even, we find out later on in laws, gets to celebrate all the Jewish holidays, and has many privileges that no other culture that we know of would have awarded to them. So why would somebody choose to remain in servitude? And this really bothered the rabbis. For example, what this same Rabbeinu Bachya says makes the parallel with the blood being smeared during the Passover sacrifice. This blood, he says, signifies the reverse of what the blood on the doorposts and lintel of the Jews in Egypt on that fateful night had signified, the opposite. Then it had expressed the desire to be free. This time it expresses the desire of the owner of that ear to remain unfree. The letters of the Hebrew name, he does a little gematria here, this Rabbi Bachya, they have a numerical value of 400, as if to symbolize that the servant to whom it was applied wanted to add to the 400 years of bondage of the Jewish people in Israel. In Egypt. So
Gail?
Here's another, I'll read you another commentary in the same vein. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, this is actually not simply that the slave wanted to remain in servitude. The way the shot is that it was that he didn't want to leave his wife and children.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's a different situation.
Yes. And, you might skip over that. You might be so shocked by the idea that somebody would choose to remain a slave that you almost kind of miss that piece. But I think that's a central argument. Imagine what would we do if we were in the place of this person. So if he came single, he leaves single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. But if his master matched him up with a wife and they had children, the wife and the children remain the master's property. And then what does this poor guy do? He's facing, it really made me think, it's not a good analogy, but during the Holocaust, parents had to make extremely painful decisions. Do I send my kid to a convent to be maybe protected? It's the separate. Well, we're so aware with the situation with asylum seekers in this country of families being separated and how heartbreaking that is. And October 7th, over and over again, families were separated. Judy.
What if there were no children? What if it was just the slave had a wife?
They can leave. She can leave with him, it says.
So it's only with children. I mean, no. I mean, if the master had matched up the slave with his wife and there are children, then he must decide. But it doesn't say if the master matched the slave up with a wife and there are no children.
I see what you're saying.
If he had a wife.
Well,
Yeah.
it says if he had
That-
it doesn't stipulate.
Judy's correct that
Yeah,
this is if he came with a wife.
doesn't stipulate.
No, it doesn't spell it out. Yeah, it doesn't say it. If anyone wants to check on commentaries this week, that would be a good thing to research. What happens if the master matched the man up with a wife?
Yeah.
I don't know. All I can see is, the Peshat. Yes. Patty.
But also go back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Why would a slave want to stay, even aside from the wife and the kids? I mean, he's had a pretty secure life with being pretty well taken care of. I mean, you said, with being able to exist and not more than exist. And it's more secure, easier way to go than to be out in the world on your own. If he's been fine as a slave, I mean, doing a job in a way, then it wouldn't be such a bad thing to stay.
Mhm.
Yeah. If he had a benevolent master, it
Yep.
reminds me of all the stories of former convicts committing a crime to go back to jail because
Mm,
they had a secure life
mm.
and they knew from one day to the next what to expect.
Um,
May I
Jay-
make a little, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Merle, finish.
Oh,
So-
thanks. I just wanted to piggyback off of what the Rav said, the Spanish sage. And, the selection, like you didn't really need the doorpost to anchor the all, could have been anything. Could have been a table, it could have been just his hand on the other side. But it's such a visual that the servant had a choice to walk through. This was not original. I read this in a commentary. The servant had a choice to walk through the door to freedom.
Yeah, this is, you're quoting Kli Yakar, actually, who says exactly that. The Kli Yakar, who was a Polish Torah commentator, he says, why the doorpost? Because a door was open for him to go free and he refused to go. Yeah, that's where you were going.
Mhm.
Thank you. Jay.
And also, this is a theme in Shawshank Redemption. Living outside prison was too hard.
Yeah.
Gail,
Uh,
I want to mention one other thing, which I was fascinated by. You're mentioning that the word "all" is only mentioned once, if I understood you correctly, and it reminded me of Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh.
mhm,
When God said, "That is my name," I think that's only mentioned once, and
mhm.
which is fascinating because it's such a major statement by God.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Jay.
The master allowed him a wife because the wife had become a servant. That's how the master had the woman. If the master didn't have the woman, he couldn't give the woman
Oh, good
man.
point. Yeah.
So she couldn't leave unless her 7 years were done.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure in the Talmud, they go into this in great detail. All the circumstances and all the details. Thank you. All right, I just want to read you one more. This is from the Talmud also. One more judgment by the rabbis because they really did struggle with this, and this is probably the most famous commentary on this passage. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, why at the door? Why is this taking place at the door? Because by the door they went from servitude to freedom. The students asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, why should the slave be pierced in his ear rather than in any of his other body parts? Ooh. So see, we haven't come to that question yet. It's a fair question. He said to them, that is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, the ear which heard at Mount Sinai, quote, you shall have no other powers besides me, and removed from himself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, but accepted the yoke of flesh and blood. The ear which heard before Mount Sinai, for the children of Israel are my servants, capital M, and went and acquired another master. Therefore, the ear should come and be pierced, for he did not follow what his ear heard. So that the significance they attach to the ear. And, that puncture is going to be visible to the whole community. Some people think an earring was put in there. It doesn't say you should do that. But, is it a badge of shame? Is it punitive? There's a whole feeling among many of the rabbis that yes, and this is supposed to be almost like an object lesson for the rest of the community that this is not a good idea. However, we've seen there were practical reasons why the system, and the fact that the Torah even thought of a way to help a person who's destitute or in trouble, a way that seemed more humane than just letting the person starve or whatever. Eileen, did you want to?
I just said, I looked up the Deuteronomy reference and it
Oh.
says you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's going to go all the way through.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But they take it out. Obviously, he continues.
Of course.
living life.
Yeah.
Now, folks, I want to get to something. Was there a question?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think it also kind of gets the owner, the master, off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sign that I'm not breaking our law here. I am not keeping this person against his will to enslave him. And it's a sign to everything that the master did as he was supposed to.
Very good. Yeah, that's so it's almost like a contract, or both parties, both people are party to it, and it's a decision that was not imposed on the slave, which is kind of amazing in itself. So I wanted to tell you that this past week I went to an amazing conference in St. Louis on Jewish music. There were 500 people there from all over the country and all ages. And we spent 2.5 days learning, singing, praying. It was incredible.
Did David go? Did your son go?
My David was there.
Okay.
And Cantor Melanie was there as well. Yeah. So this is just an amazing thing. And the theme of this whole conference was the people of the door. People of the door, DOOR, the kind of dialect that we are talking about right here. So I wanted to bring back to you a little bit of what I learned there, because it's so relevant to this Parsha. So I went to a session. Probably the rabbi who was doing the most teaching is Rabbi David Ingber. He's with the Romamu congregation in New York City, which incorporates music into all the praying, and it's very beautiful. They have very beautiful services. I was there once, and Rabbi Ingber went into all this business of, why would someone voluntarily enslave himself or to a master? But he talked a great deal about the mezuzah, and that's what I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. So, and he also talked a little bit about the awl and why the ear. All right, hold on. Okay. So what he said was, freedom is won by walking through a door. It takes courage, and he pointed out that. What did the Israelites have to do the night before the Exodus? They had to take a lamb and slaughter it and keep the blood. Now, the lamb in Egypt was a god. And so what they were doing, he said, is that they were taking a huge risk by flouting something very sacred to the Egyptians, not just more discreetly walking out, but like right in their face. They were killing these lambs. And what he said was that this is a model of civil disobedience, which is interesting commentary. The mezuzah, he pointed out, this is so brilliant. Mezuzah is, in this case, there wasn't a mezuzah like what we put up, but it was the doorpost. It's not totally inside or outside the house. And the root of the word mezuzah is zuz. Anybody know what that means in Hebrew? Move. Right. So this place where the mezuzah is, this place, he called it a liminal space. I can't remember exactly what liminal means, but it's some sort of mystical term. All kinds of things can happen in this space. You use that space to go in and to come out. And all kinds of things can happen when you're in that space of the mezuzah. And so to escape from slavery, you can't get out of Egypt. You can't escape from slavery without walking through that mezuzah. He also pointed out that the name for God, Shaddai, which is on a lot of mezuzot that we hang up today, the three letters Shin, Daled, Yud, stands for Shomer Daltot Yisrael, the guardian of the doors of Israel, the people Israel. So Shaddai, that name. And he said the door is a litmus test of your trust in the protection of God. So, all these things that happen in the doorway, can you think of other doorways in Torah that are significant along with this one?
Abraham was sitting in the doorway when he saw the three visitors, the three angels. That's one.
Okay, so that's really interesting because we have doorway. That was a tent, right? That was a tent. A door is hard. I mean, if you can put an awl through someone's ear, it has to be a hard surface. So I think there's a continuum of the kinds of entrances and exits. And we lived in tents for 40 years in the desert, right? You also go in and out of that space, but it's less rigid. It's more fluid or more flexible than the door that we're talking about in this parsha. Someone else want to comment on that?
I thought of another one, but if someone else has one first. Lot, when the townspeople wanted to break the door down, and he gave them his daughters, so there was evil on both sides of the door, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a bad scene back in Breshit in Genesis when it took two angels to save those people, and get them out of there. Judy.
So I was thinking about that too, Merle. I was wondering the Mishkan or the
good.
There was an area where common people couldn't pass through. There was clearly a passageway that was just for the Kohanim. Is that accurate?
Yes, but that was they were curtains.
So there was nothing solid.
Not judging by the description in the Torah later on.
Okay, I was just thinking of a passageway.
Very detailed, just building the Mishkan, all the materials that were used. There were beams, but there was also the Holy of Holies that only the high priest was allowed to go into. But as far as I can recall, it was not a solid door, but a curtain. Yes, Bev.
Yeah, I'm thinking of about one of the, and I'm not sure which one, where the men came to the door and they were going to take the sons, and the father gave them the daughters to take.
Excellent.
That's what I was talking about. Lot.
No, I think she means Jephthah.
Yes, Jephthah.
Jephthah.
Yeah.
Good.
And I forgot to look it up, but Jephthah's daughter. Yeah, excellent example.
Very good.
Yeah, so I forget which. I think it's in the book of. I don't know if it's in the Torah.
I don't know.
Anybody wants to look quickly in the index, but
another quick question, Gail.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little confused. I'm not sure why this part, this whole section, the part about the slaves. I'm not sure what it's supposed to. I'm not really.
Excuse me, Bev. Your wonderful, insightful comment is in the book of Judges.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But I'm not sure what is this teaching us how to affect other people. I'm not quite sure what why this is here. I mean, I've heard you and I get it, but it's still problematic for me.
So thank you, it's an excellent question. One of the themes that goes all through the Torah is it's about the treatment, how we're supposed to treat other people. You were slaves in the land of Egypt. Don't forget what that was like. I was just going to get to that passage. So Beverly, it's an excellent segue. If you go to Deuteronomy, this is the other passage where the same story with the awl and the servant up against the doorpost occurs on 1079. This is the passage that comes later where the whole idea, the whole story is amplified and the values become, very, very significant. So I'm going to read Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 12. If a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years. And in the 7th year, you shall set him free, just like what we read in Mishpatim. Anybody want to continue reading here a little bit, just to change voices? All right, I'll go. Judy, go ahead. Unmute yourself. I'm on page 1079 in Eitz Chaim, Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 12.
Okay, if a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed. Furnish him out of the flock, threshing floor, and vat with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I enjoin this commandment upon you today.
And keep going a little bit, please.
But should he say to you, quote, I do not want to leave you, end quote, for he loves you and your household and is happy with you, you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall become your slave in perpetuity. Do the same with your female slave. When you do set him free, do not feel aggrieved, for in the 6 years he has given you double the service of a hired man. Moreover, the Lord your God will bless you in all you do.
Thank you. So let's compare those two passages, right? This is so fascinating. Back in Mishpatim, I mean, where we are now, it's sort of like the framework. This is what you do. Steps 1, 2, and 3. And it's very simple and straightforward. Now we're getting this whole framework sort of filled out, and a lot more detail is provided. So what are some of the differences you're seeing in this second telling of the same story? Okay, Judy, go ahead.
Well, this slave is being given things to sort of get him started, right? He's not just going out with nothing. But it's funny where our minds go, Gail. He's going to have a permanent mark on his ear, but his status could change.
Yes.
If he so chooses. And it reminds me of like people who join gangs and they have tattoos that are permanent marks that even if they choose to leave the gang, it's there. People will always know.
Fascinating.
Well, he
That's
wouldn't leave
went.
once he has the whole.
Right, the all.
He's
But it's
not
a mark for life. My point was that
yes,
it's
he's
marked
for life. Yeah.
Well, so interesting, because in the session I was in this conference where we discussed this story, people were saying, well, I had my ears pierced and it grew back.
Right.
If you don't keep an earring in there, it will grow back together. So maybe he's not marked for life, which is symbolic. Maybe that former slave status isn't necessarily scarring him for life. So yeah, there's room for interpretation. Another thing that comes out here that I think is so important is, well, one is bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt and I redeemed you. Should he say to you, verse 16, I do not want to leave you, for look at the motivation that he's given here. For he loves you and your household and is happy with you. That's really filling in a story here that implies that this slave has been treated well and he was content. I mean, someone talked about that before. Maybe he wants to say because of the security and he's become part of the family. Yeah, just looking to see. Okay. Any other comments on what's different here or what's been added to fill out this whole situation, this whole story?
Well, it's interesting, Gail. I mean, you're talking about an emotional component,
Yeah.
and it addresses the emotions of the servant and the emotions of the master. It's saying
Right.
how the master should feel and how the master should process this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like don't feel aggrieved. Looking for the Hebrew here. Lo yikshe be'einecha. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I like kasha.
Kasha means
make it-
hard or difficult. So it shouldn't seem difficult in your eyes to let him go. For in the 6 years, he has given you double the service of a hireman. Whoa, where have we heard that before? It's just popping into my mind. Serving 6 years, serving.
Yeah. Jacob for
Jacob.
Leah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it was seven years, and that's what this one says. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 6 years. And in the 7th year, you'll set him free. So I don't know. Do you see any significance in that parallel? It seems, well, we know that 7 in Judaism is a number with significance, and it occurs like 7 days of the week, Shabbat. It's used over and over again. 7, also 40. These are significant years, but I think that's interesting. So yeah, the motivation on both sides, the slave and the master, is addressed here, and it really beautifully fills out the whole situation. It makes it maybe more understandable or more relatable to us. Other thoughts on that? Okay.
Well, Jacob wasn't considered a slave.
No.
No.
Sometimes I think like we really reach to make things work out.
Yeah.
With numbers and such,
but it's also, once again, the English. He was like an indebted servant to Laban, to Laban. Laban made him work for him. So he had the choice to do it or not, but if he wanted to get Rachel, he had to do it. So
yeah, there was coercion. I mean, It was a choice, but yeah, there was coercion involved. But I think the key is maybe that the same word is used, Eved, Avad. Jacob Avad, he worked, not just, like he went to the office and got paid to do it. No, I mean, he had his room and board, so to speak, but he didn't earn any money from doing that. Although he did prosper, but that was because he was so smart and practical. Other thoughts similar? Do you have, because we're coming closer to the end of the class, now that we've looked, in some detail at this whole idea of slavery, the ritual of the awl and the mezuzah, any thoughts? Is it more complicated than you would have thought on first reading? Beverly's shaking her head. Well, that was, simple yes or no, right? Okay, so just to take you to the end of this Parsha, I mean, no way you could spend a whole class on almost any part of this Parsha, but what happens at the end, let me just find it. We go back to this narrative at the end of this Parsha. The revelation at Sinai was dramatic, full of lightning and thunder and voices and still small voice and fear and all kinds of emotions. And the Parsha kind of goes back to that atmosphere. And God is calling Moses and the elders to return to the mountain after telling the people all the words, divrei, of the Torah that God had given them, the commandments, the Mishpatim. I mean, it says that God gave all these commandments that we're reading about right after Sinai. Some people say yes, some people say no, but the people accept it. And Moses ratifies this covenant. It's a covenant being affirmed with a sacrifice. And he goes up the mountain with 70 elders, and they see this beautiful divine vision. Let's just see if we have a minute to look. It's only a few sentences, but it's really beautiful. Hold on. All right, I can't find it. It's they actually, it says they see God.
The blue floor, the one with this blue floor, that one?
Yeah, the sapphire.
Okay, page 478 in Chaim 10. And they saw the God of Israel under.
You want to read it, Pearl, since you have
Sure.
it? Page 478.
Then Moses and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet there was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yet he did not raise his hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They beheld God, and they ate and drank.
Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it's like a mystical vision. Perhaps the way some people experience God, but it's maybe troubling too, because there's some personification, there's some anthropomorphism going on here. But I'm sure Kabbalah has a lot to say about this passage. It just seems very different from what we've been reading. You know, just the fact that the Torah has this versatility or range of description of things that we can really relate to, you know, in terms of everyday life. And then this mystical vision that is just absolutely beautiful and not threatening. I mean, it's a vision of God. Later on, we have when Moses says, show me your likeness. And God says, you can't see me or you'll die. So he tells Moses to hide in the cleft of the rock, and God passes by and Moses can see his back. Eileen wants to know, is this the first time that God is actually seen? That's great.
Yeah, and then, well, it's rabbinic, but the question of the verb seen, and the rabbis say understood and sensed, and they have a greater understanding and a greater connection to God, not that, you know, actual vision that they saw an image of God.
Yeah, I mean, God is manifested in God's activities, in God's actions mostly. There are many signs, you know, angels are sent, something miraculous happens. I love when Jacob wakes up from his dream and he says, oh my goodness, God was in this place and I didn't know it. So he doesn't come face to face with God. Only Moses is said to come panim el panim, but that's troubling, face to face with God. He never claims, you know, I saw God, you know, I'm the big bacher. He never claims that, but he comes as close as any other human being in the Bible to that experience. I see it more as an experience, you know, like a revelation, not necessarily a literal seeing. Okay, I think we're at the end. This was a wonderful discussion. Thank you all so much for your participation.